Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I'm John Schmeelk. Welcome in Carl Banks, Ring of Honor member, two-time Super Bowl champion, voice of the Giants on the radio with Bob Papa, our analyst. Carl, we're at the quarter season mark here, and the Giants are 1-3.
Sure.
Giants were 1-3 last year. And you just finished talking to Brian Dable for our TV show over the weekend, and I thought you asked a great question. You said there are no moral victories. 1-3 is 1-3, and we will get to that too. But doesn't this 1-3 heading into Week 5 this year feel a lot different than last year's 1-3 heading into Week 5?
Yeah, Bob.
You go ahead. It's Carl. It's fine. Burn through it. I think that's hilarious. Roll through it.
Force of habit, man.
Go ahead, man. That's great. I love it.
Yeah, John, when you look at this team in a vacuum and you just say, okay, are they better this year than last year? You say yes, because you look at categories, right? You look at where they are in sacks given up, where they are in sacks taken, right? And they are ranked relatively high. They were last in the league at this point last year with sacks given up by an offense and by sacks generated by a defense, and they're in the top 5 right now. So you say, okay, that's an area of improvement. But the difference is, or the thing that stays the same, is the record, right? So you can look at your own improvement internally, and you still have to figure out how to win games, right? Because, again, there are no moral victories, but you can feel better about the competitiveness of this team at this stage, and you can see that this team is getting closer, right? But the thing about getting closer, you've got to somehow break through. You got to find that ugly win, right? That ugly win so that you can say, okay, this effort is paying off. I don't think the team will get demoralized. I think there's strong character in the locker room, but you got to just figure out that one extra something that'll get you a victory.
And that's why I think it's almost a more frustrating 1-3 than last year. It's less demoralizing, but it's more frustrating, right? Because you're sitting here and you're like, all right, well, if Gano doesn't pop his hamstring in Week 2, or Neighbors catches a 4th down play, and then against the Cowboys in the Cowboys game, if Wan'Dale Robinson or Darius Slane or whoever catches balls, whatever, any one of those plays, Jones hits 1 or 2 of the deep balls in the first half. It could be a million different moments in that game that changes it. You could easily be sitting at 3-1 and feeling really good about where you are. So now it's like the conversation has changed, where now your team's good enough and it's playing well enough to win, but now you actually have to figure out a way to win, which is almost a different challenge, right?
Yeah, it is, and that can be frustrating, right? Because you know that for 3 of the 4 games, you should have found a way to win them. You were there.
Especially since, and it's you beating yourself. It's not the other team outclassing you, which is what's a killer.
You take the first game and you say, okay, they just got the doors blown off, right? They were
Vikings
not competitive.
whooped them.
Yeah.
Vikings whooped them.
The next 3 games, you look at, you're like, these should be victories, right? But they weren't. And the schedule doesn't stop and wait for you to get better. You've got to be better. You've got to do the little things to get those ugly victories. And, I've been saying this all season since the Minnesota game, is that your best players have to be your best players every game. They can't pick and choose when they want to be best. They've got to be best no matter who they're going against. Your role players are the guys that have to pay attention to detail. And you're starting to see some of those role players stack back-to-back performances, especially in the young defensive backfield. And when we speak even the young defensive backfield, the margin of error, right, is very slim. Case in point, the CeeDee Lamb touchdown. It would have been a big play. But as a result of a bad angle by a young defensive back, it went for a touchdown. He knew what he was supposed to do, right? He was over the top, but he just overran it. So those are fixable things. You want to get those fixed in, like I said, in one of those ugly victories, but you have it. Now, each week is a different challenge, right? He's going to have to always stay locked in. All of these young defensive backs stay locked into their assignments. But then there's the football aspect of it called tackling, right? And called intercepting. Deonte Banks, with the exception of a red zone play by Amari Cooper where he just gave him a two-way go, every one of the vertical balls he's covering, he's in position, he's in phase, and he's got to either intercept or knock the ball down.
You took the words out of my mouth, Carl, because when you brought up the defensive backs and details, I was going to go right to Deonte Banks because I think his coverage, just actually staying in phase and mirroring, has been good. Now, he did on that CeeDee Lamb play, I think he did kind of let him go a little bit when he should have. He lost a little bit of focus there.
But he had a safety over the top.
He did have a safety over the top. That is true.
Yeah.
That's just one of those guys, and I think a perfect example of the young guys having to lock in on some of these finer details that make the difference between a play and not a play. And there was another play, too, in that game, and we can go back to the defensive back, but I thought this was a good example. Malik Neighbors, who's been fantastic, we'll talk about him, on the play right before the field goal on the 4th and goal from the 3, first drive of the third quarter. You know, they run that little swing route to Wan'Dale Robinson, and Overshown comes shooting out of a cannon, tackles him by the sideline. Well, Neighbors runs a stop route. He's supposed to set like a little rub on Overshown. He sets it a little bit too shallow. Overshown still has an angle to get out to Robinson. It's like little details like that that are the difference between scores and no scores.
And the other aspect of this, when we talk about those little attention to detail things, you have to be complimentary on offense and on defense. Defense have to complement the offense and vice versa, but also plays like you just said that's complementary football where Neighbors has to get the right depth. He has to make sure that play is executed on his end so that Robinson can get the ball and get some yardage. So that's complimentary, right? And then the usage rate of someone like Malik Neighbors, they're feeding him, right? But those off plays where someone else has an opportunity to make a play, those receivers have to make sure that they catch footballs and do what they're supposed to do, because at the rate their Neighbors is getting targeted, it's pulling resources from the defense. So those other guys have got to be able to make the plays that are there for them to make as well.
All right, why don't we stick on the offense since you ended on Neighbors, then we'll rotate back over to the defense. Daniel Jones, how do you think he's played these first 4 weeks? I went through it. He's averaging last 3 games. It's 240-something yards per game, 95 quarterback rating, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, only been sacked 4 times. I think he's doing a good job of recognizing some of the blitzes and getting the ball out. But there's also been a lot of missed opportunities there, especially on balls down the field. So your thoughts on what we see from Daniel the last 3 weeks?
So in terms of running the offense, again, with the exception of the first game of the season, he's been in total command of the offense. He's made great decisions with the football. And I think from a short to mid-range game, he's got it dialed in.
Yep, I'm with you.
Long range, verticals, and deep balls, he hasn't had it calibrated yet. It's not a matter, and I've heard a lot of different theories of, ever since the neck surgeries, he doesn't have the arm strength. Well, I would say you may have a point, except for he's got his fair share of overthrows.
The first 3 weeks, it was all overthrows, Carl.
Yeah, they were all overthrows, right? So it's not a matter of arm strength. It's just calibrating it. It's like, and you're a basketball player. You know how it feels when you start to drain the deep ones, right? But you got to calibrate it in.
Yeah, but when they're not falling, everything is either a little long or a little short, and you can't quite get it.
Right, and in football, you do have a little bit more margin for error. You just got to get it in the neighborhood, right?
Correct.
Like, if you can hit the rim as a quarterback, the ball's going to be caught. And, but in basketball, you hit the rim, it's going to clank. But it's just a matter of, I think.
Great way to put it.
He has to calibrate that long ball. It's just as simple as that, because he's had him overthrown, he's had him underthrown. And the one to Malik Neighbors where he was wide open, it looks like he just tried to touch it so he didn't overthrow it, right?
No, he was like, he's so open, I'm not missing him.
I'm not missing him, so I'm just going to just kind of make sure he gets it, and instead of just laying it out there and letting them run under it. But, there's to say that and saying he needs to get it calibrated. I think the more technical way of saying it is he's got to trust his mechanics.
And just let it go, right?
Yeah, just trust the mechanics. Do what you do, right? Yeah. And trust it, and it'll work out the way it's supposed to, because it's not like you can't make throws.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
It's been said that nice guys finish last. But is that really true? I'm Tim Harford, host of the Cautionary Tales podcast, and I'm exploring that very question. Join me for my new mini-series on the art of fairness. We'll travel from New York to Tahiti to India on a quest to learn how to succeed without being a jerk. We'll examine stories of villains undone by their villainy and monstrous, self-devouring egos. And we'll delve into the extraordinary power of decency. We'll face mutiny on the vast Pacific Ocean, blaze a trail with a pioneering skyscraper, and dare to confront a formidable empire. The Art of Fairness on Cautionary Tales. Listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. Off the top, you mentioned the offensive line, and that, I think, has been a source of a ton of the improvement this team has shown, Carl. I just mentioned it, last 3 games, just 4 sacks allowed. The pass protection, are they a top 5 line? Maybe not. But Daniel Jones has had room to operate the offense. And Brian Daboll, more importantly, I think, now is free reign to call whatever play he wants.
Correct.
He doesn't have to adjust his play calls based on the play of the offensive line. So let's start the pass protection part of it first. I think you have to be really happy with what we've seen so far this year.
I am. And the thing that's so noticeable, John, is that this offensive line is connected, right? So when you see the stunts, you don't have like stair steps where one guy's here and the other guy is behind them in just these natural creases.
They're building a wall.
They're building a wall, and they're communicating and passing things off, right? Even when it comes to the speed rush, right? With the job that Andrew Thomas did versus Micah Parsons. Yeah. I mean, look, he's had 2 unicorns back-to-back weeks. He had Myles Garrett and he had Micah Parsons, 2 basically different types of guys, but just unicorns in what they can do, and he fared well. You know, I don't think when the folks at these places that give you the analytic breakdowns and his score against Myles Garrett say he had his worst game, but his quarterback was clean.
Well, and by the way, you having your worst game against Myles Garrett shouldn't be a surprise, by the way.
Right, but you keep your quarterback clean for the most part of the game, right? You keep him off of the quarterback. Yeah, I mean, you're going to struggle a little bit against those guys. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Myles Garrett does that to everybody.
Right. But then he comes back this week, or this past week, and he puts a really good performance together versus Lawrence and Micah Parsons.
And they, by the way, they're doing it without a ton of help. Like they're not leaving, they're not leaving a lot of guys in.
Right.
Like they're doing a pretty nice job one-on-one here.
Yeah. So this offensive line, from a pass pro perspective, has been really good. Run game, we haven't seen what I think will be their best. And I spoke about being complementary. Your running back has to be complementary to his offensive line and vice versa, right? The offensive line needs to make sure that they sustain blocks, but also Singletary has to stay in his character in that he is a patient and disciplined runner. Right? Allow some of these things to develop unless there's a player that flashes through the line of scrimmage. Give your offensive line a chance to move some things because it opens up late. And, in the Dallas game, it just seemed like he did not stay in that character of who he was. He's a disciplined runner, right? He's a patient and disciplined runner. And the Dallas game, it just seemed like he was trying too hard to make something happen and just missed some opportunities.
Final question on the offense before we jump over to the defense. I've gotten this question from a million fans, so I'm just going to throw it at you, Carl. Are you okay with the distribution of targets on offense? One, with Malik getting all these targets. I have no problem with it. He's your best player. Get him the damn ball. And then, is there a way to get Hyatt more involved, even though it's pretty clear right now that they have more trust in Robinson and Slayton as the second and third guys in whatever order we want to put them in? Is there a way to try to get him more involved to take advantage of some of his speed?
Yeah, I think that's going to come. And I would encourage Hyatt to stay patient, do not have rabbit ears, because both he and Bellinger, both are guys that we know are guys that can contribute big plays to this offense. And I think in time that's going to happen sooner than later. You just got to get your matchups. And quite frankly, as they start to execute better and get into a rhythm offensively, then the personnel really becomes an issue for defenses. But when they're dropping footballs on key downs, it just messes up the rhythm. So now your play caller has to go back to the drawing board and go to, whatever that next down and distance is. Whereas if these plays are executed, they're in a rhythm, and now you can just start subbing your personnel, and he can dial up the type of plays he wants to dial up. There's no disputing, in my opinion, that Hyatt has some of the best hands and ball skills that's in this group of receivers. So I don't think that's lost on anybody. And I just think he just has to stay locked in. And, every receiver, they like to have the football thrown to him, or they at least want the opportunity. And right now he's, gets 2 or 3 plays a game, and most of them are go routes, right? He gets overthrown on one in Cleveland, but just stay ready. I just think he's a weapon that is going to come in handy, and he's going to be used more frequently moving forward.
Giants Huddle brought to you by Citizens Official Bank of the Giants. Citizens will donate $750 to the Giants Foundation for each scoring drive during the 2024 season. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
It's been said that nice guys finish last. But is that really true? I'm Tim Harford, host of the Cautionary Tales podcast, and I'm exploring that very question. Join me for my new mini-series on the art of fairness. We'll travel from New York to Tahiti to India on a quest to learn how to succeed without being a jerk. We'll examine stories of villains undone by their villainy and monstrous, self-devouring egos. And we'll delve into the extraordinary power of decency. We'll face mutiny on the vast Pacific Ocean, blaze a trail with a pioneering skyscraper, and dare to confront a formidable empire. The Art of Fairness on Cautionary Tales. Listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Defense, Carl, the run defense, I think we all know that has to be better. Even though the Cowboys' numbers last week weren't spectacular in the second half, they had a couple drives where they were able to sustain them by just pounding the football. And that's a run game that has really struggled so far this year. So as a guy who was, frankly, one of the best run-defending linebackers in the history of the league, when you look at this run defense, where do you see the points where, like, all right, this can get better, A, B, C, and D?
It really comes down to tackling. At the point of attack, you have the right players on the field, and you miss tackles at the point of attack. And this is, I would say at this point, John, they've just been inconsistent, because there are some games they tackle really well, other games they haven't. And then understanding situational football. That's the other part. But the defensive backs, the young defensive backs are being challenged. They're tackling better. Your guys up front have got to continue to, play good gap responsible football. But they've got to make tackles. That's really what it comes down to in the run game. If you can play your responsibility, there's going to be somebody at the point of attack. You got to make the tackle, but tackling is a team effort too.
Yeah.
You know, guys have got to get off the ball so that one guy is not the only guy that has to make the tackle.
All right, 2 more questions, Carl. The pass rush, since you already touched on the defensive backs, we're not going to go there again. We've seen it in spurts, right? Thibodeau had a really good game against the Cowboys. Burns had the big-time game against the Browns. Dexter was quiet against Dallas because they double-teamed him every time, but he was really good the first 3 weeks. When you look at this pass rush, how close do you see the Voltron coming together? Because it seems like they're still kind of fighting separately, and they haven't brought it all together in one game quite yet.
I just think individually, like I said, your best players have to be your best players every game. Now, the other guys get paid too, so if they want to put 3 hats on Dexter or 2 hats on Dexter, your other 2 guys have got to be those players. And then you also have to factor in how Shane Bowen is calling his defenses, because he's kind of broken whatever they thought his trend was in terms of not being a blitzing coordinator. They're getting sacks, right? So you just have to accept the fact that schematically sometimes it's meant for somebody else. I mean, you got safeties in the Washington game. They had most of the sacks.
They did.
Right?
It was Pinnock and Drew Phillips had 3 of the 5 sacks, I think, whatever it was.
And then in the Cleveland game, Brian Burns was back there frequently, right? So you just have to watch it all come together as a unit. And those individual guys, and that's the thing about sacks, they come in bunches. So I'm not concerned with Brian Burns, especially when you see the effort and you can see him beating guys. And look, again, the other team gets paid too. So if they say, Dak Prescott, we're not letting you hold the ball, we're getting the ball out of your hands before this guy can get to you.
And that's what he did that week,
and
too.
They did that, but that's where the word complementary comes in. Your defensive back's got to play tighter coverage, make him pull that first look down, and then your pass rush will start to get there.
I know fans, just a quick follow-up, they were like, it blitzed all these times against the Browns, and you don't blitz as much against Dallas. And I'm like, guys, there's a difference between blitzing Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott. Yes,
exactly. And there's a big difference. Just put it that way. Dak he will gut you if he sees you blitzing.
He will throw to CeeDee Lamb every single time.
he will gut you. And Deshaun Watson, they're not in sync. So create confusion for him versus Dak is 2 different games.
All right, finally, game plan against the Seahawks on offense and defense. We literally, we're recording this on Tuesday. We both of us watched the game last night. They looked great on offense, run game, pass game. Geno looked terrific, but then on defense, they couldn't stop anybody. So your thoughts on what you saw from Seattle and what the Giants need to do on both sides of the ball to win the game on Sunday afternoon?
Well, offensively, Seattle is just as complete a team as you can get in terms of complementing run pass. If we just want to look at the run game, they've got 3 good runners. Kenneth Walker, when he's in the game, every gap on the line of scrimmage is the point of attack. I mean, because where he starts and where he ends can be totally dynamically opposite, right? I mean, he can hit going left and make this cut, and it's very dynamic. I mean, he's gone.
Right, he makes people miss. He changes directions.
And he's got great contact balance, right? They've got good speed at the other running back. And then Geno Smith, let's just blur out who he's throwing to right now. But the fact that he makes decisions, he can extend plays, he's athletic. And he's confident. This is a different Geno Smith. Now, it's been this way for the last 3 seasons, but he's off to another really good start. Now, you bring into focus who he's throwing to. He's got one of the most unstoppable receivers in football, DK Metcalf. Anything contested, it belongs to him, he believes, right? He's got speed. He's a good route runner, but he's physical. Lockett, the young wide receiver in Njigba.
Yep.
All these guys are great weapons, and you have a quarterback who can get it to them, who will always look, even when he's moving around in the pocket, he's moving around to find an open guy, and he's got a cannon that could get it there.
It's funny when you give quarterbacks a chance to develop. They
Sure.
tend to get better as they get older. It's
Yeah.
funny how that works, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff, my friend.
Amen.
I appreciate it. Giants Huddle Podcast brought to you by Citizens Official Bank of the Giants. For Carl Banks, I'm John Schmeelk. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time, everybody.